Welcome to the Book Talks, where stories aren't just read, they're understood. Today, the book under discussion is Amerika by Franz Kafka.
And what a beautifully strange book it is to dig into today.
Oh, it really is. I mean, imagine being handed the American dream on an absolute silver platter. You arrive as a destitute immigrant, and within days, you discover a wealthy uncle.
Right, a senator, no less.
Exactly. You're suddenly living in a penthouse, you have endless opportunities, your future is totally secured. And then just imagine losing every single bit of it overnight because of one minor, almost invisible social faux pas.
Yeah, just poof, gone.
Just gone. You're cast out onto a dusty highway with nothing but an old suitcase and an umbrella. So today our mission for this deep dive is to navigate a narrative landscape that, well, it actively redraws itself every time you blink.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks. We are diving into the fascinating, absurd, and often just surreal descent of Franz Kafka's Amerika, which is also known as The Man Who Disappeared. We've gathered a stack of translated excerpts from the text, and we're going to trace how a naive 16-year-old boy attempts to survive a labyrinth where the rules change depending on, whoever is currently yelling at him.
Which happens a lot.
A lot. But first, let's get you, the listener, caught up on the sheer chaos of the opening chapters, since we briefly covered them in a previous overview.
Yeah, and that opening really sets the psychological tone for, well, everything that follows.
Totally. So we begin with this 16-year-old kid, Karl Rossmann. He's been packed off to America by his parents in total disgrace because a maid seduced him and had his child. And before he even steps off the boat, Kafka gives us this skewed, almost hostile vision of reality.
It's so unsettling.
Right. As Karl sails into New York Harbor, he looks up at the Statue of Liberty. And she isn't holding a torch to welcome the tired and poor. She's holding a sword.
Yeah, it's such a brilliant, ominous alteration. I mean, the sword immediately tells the reader and Karl that this landscape is not designed for sanctuary.
No, not at all.
It's designed for judgment, you know, and severance.
Yeah, severance is the perfect word. From there, the narrative just tumbles into this beautiful chaos. Karl gets lost deep in the bowels of the ship, just trying to find his umbrella, of all things.
Just such a Kafka thing to happen.
It really is.
Yeah.
And he valiantly attempts to defend a wronged ship's stoker in front of the captain, a crusade that goes just horribly awkwardly awry.
So awkward.
But miraculously, in that very room, he stumbles into his rich Uncle Jacob. Suddenly, Karl is thrust into high society. He's taking horseback riding lessons, learning English, and marveling at this incredible American desk in his room.
Oh, the desk.
The desk. It has 100 secret compartments that shift shape when you turn a mechanical handle.
Well, and the desk functions as this perfect mechanical metaphor for Kafka's version of Amerika. Like, it's intricate, beautifully constructed, highly impressive, but ultimately bewildering and totally unnecessary to a human being who is just, trying to write a letter.
Yeah, it's overkill.
Exactly. It's the ultimate rags to riches fantasy handed to him, yet it feels entirely artificial.
Because it is artificial, he loses it all in a single night. He disobeys his uncle just once to visit the country house of a Mr. Pollender. And for this minor infraction, just straying from his uncle's strict itinerary, he is handed a midnight letter by the sinister Mr. Green.
Banished.
Completely banished from his uncle's life. He's cast out of the social elite, sent packing with a third-class ticket to San Francisco, his father's old army suitcase, and his umbrella.
And that banishment is really the true beginning of our deep dive today. I mean, from this point of exile, the narrative kicks into high gear.
It really does.
We transition instantly from that glittering, insulated illusion of the American dream straight into the harsh, dusty reality of the road. Karl begins this terrifying descent into the American underclass.
So let's look at the mechanics of that descent, because almost immediately upon hitting the road, Karl is paired up with two highly opportunistic tramps. There's a Frenchman named Delamarche and an Irishman named Robinson.
And they are just the worst.
They are awful to him from the jump. They force Karl to carry his own heavy suitcase while they stroll along unburdened. And there's this one scene that just, it boiled my blood every time I read the excerpt.
Salami.
The salami. Karl's mother had packed him a precious piece of Verona salami. He's been carefully saving it. But the tramps force him to unpack it, and Delamarche hacks the salami to pieces with a, quote, saber-like knife.
Which is such an aggressive image.
So aggressive. And he eats almost the entire thing himself. Robinson gets a few scraps, and Karl, the kid who actually owns the food and is doing all the manual labor, he gets absolutely nothing.
Right, because we are witnessing a microeconomy of raw power here. I mean, Delamarche doesn't just eat the salami because he's starving. He eats it using a weapon-like knife to demonstrate absolute dominance.
Yes, the two-in power move.
Exactly. The tramps operate on the fundamental rule of the underclass. Kafka is depicting basically whoever has the audacity and the physical intimidation to takes.
Wow.
The European manners and concepts of fairness that Karl brought with him, they mean absolutely nothing on the dirt highway.
I mean, I struggled to buy his reaction to this, though, because Karl has a train ticket to San Francisco in his pocket. He has a literal way out.
He does.
But instead, he just keeps walking to some random town called Butterford simply because these two awful guys are heading there. I look at this and I see a kid trapped in, like, a toxic group project, terrified of failing completely alone.
That's a great analogy.
But is his decision to stay actually a desire for authority? Or is it just pure, naive passivity? Because giving up a train ticket to follow two abusive vagrants feels less like seeking order and more like a total paralysis of free will.
Well, paralysis is definitely a strong component, but the desire for an anchor, even, a heavy, rust-covered one that is dragging you down, is profoundly human.
Okay, fair.
Karl is an immigrant stripped of his entire identity. He lost his parents' approval, he lost his homeland, and he just lost his uncle's empire. He is seeking any kind of structure to tell him what to do next.
Even a terrible structure.
Right, because walking alone into the vast, unknown American continent with a single train ticket is terrifying. He submits to the tramps because their exploitation is at least a recognizable social structure. He prefers the known misery of the group over the abstract terror of total independence.
Man, that paints such a bleak picture of human psychology. And Kafka contrasts that messy human desperation with the physical environment around them. Like, as they're walking along the highway outside New York, Kafka describes the American traffic.
Oh, this scene is incredible.
It is. The excerpt details this endless column of vehicles moving in 5 distinct lanes. The environment is entirely dust-free, the air is crystal clear, and the whole operation is orchestrated silently by policemen standing on tower-like elevations.
Yeah, it is an industrialized ballet. I mean, Kafka is showcasing the soaring, perfect efficiency of American commerce happening above, entirely detached from the dirt-level reality of the individuals.
Yeah, the contrast is crazy.
The policemen on the towers are like orchestra conductors, managing the flow of capital without ever having to speak.
And then we get this incredibly awkward moment that connects those two worlds. A truck passes by them on the highway, and it carries a sign saying it's hiring dock workers for Jacob's shipping company, his uncle's firm.
The irony.
Right. And the recruiter on the truck actually beckons them to get on. Karl, who was living with the owner of that company mere days ago, hides behind the tramp so he isn't recognized. The shame is just palpable.
And that contrast in that specific moment is really essential to understanding the novel. Like, the machine works perfectly, the trucks move, the commerce flows, but down below, humans are grinding each other into the dirt.
Yeah.
Karl's shame prevents him from re-entering the machine as a lowly cog. He's beginning to realize that the systems of America might be just as dangerous as his traveling companions.
Well, he does eventually try to break free from Delamarche and Robinson. Karl realizes he needs to find his own way, and he seeks shelter in a massive institution. He manages to land a job as a lift boy at the massive Hotel Occidental.
Which is a whole other kind of trap.
Totally. But at first it seems okay. He is taken under the wing of a kindly head cook, and he actually works incredibly hard.
Yeah.
We read about his grueling 10 to 12-hour shifts, the physical toll it takes on him, and how seriously he takes the responsibility. But then, surprise, surprise, disaster strikes again.
Of course!
He is inexplicably fired. And the reason? The head porter claims Karl didn't greet him properly when walking past.
It is a magnificent example of institutionalized absurdity.
I read this and I just thought, this feels like every nightmare of modern corporate performative culture rolled into one. Like, he isn't fired for operating the elevator poorly. He is fired because he failed a completely arbitrary test of subordination.
Exactly. The head porter's demands are intentionally impossible. He requires Karl to greet him every single time he passes, and not just say hello, but stop, stand at attention, and listen until the porter officially dismisses him.
It's ridiculous.
It is. It's a standard designed entirely to prove dominance rather than facilitate actual work. The Hotel Occidental operates like a miniature authoritarian state. Your value is not determined by your labor, but by your visible subservience to the hierarchy.
And Karl even tries to defend himself with logic. He pleads with the management, saying, I greet you several times a day, but I pass you hundreds of times a day. It's a mathematical impossibility to stop every single time.
Right, but logic has absolutely no currency here.
None at all. The head waiter simply allows the head porter to fire him. Karl is cast out onto the street in disgrace, without even being allowed to grab his jacket.
And consider how Kafka defines justice through this sequence. Justice in the Hotel Occidental isn't, a blindfolded woman holding scales, weighing facts and logic.
Right.
Justice is entirely dependent on whoever holds the most arbitrary power in that specific fleeting moment. The individual is utterly powerless against the whim of a mid-level manager.
It's terrifying.
The rules aren't codified. They are invented on the spot by those in charge specifically to crush those beneath them.
And you see that exact dynamic play out in the street. Confrontation immediately following his firing. Karl is standing outside, shivering without his jacket, and a policeman stops him. The officer begins aggressively interrogating him, demanding to see his quote-unquote papers.
Which he doesn't have.
Obviously doesn't have them on him. And he is terrified to admit he just worked at the Hotel Occidental because he knows the head porter will gladly lie to the police to ruin him further. And right at the peak of this stress, Delamarche and Robinson suddenly appear out of nowhere.
The return of his original tormentors. It completely seals the trap.
It really does. Delamarche immediately lies to the policeman. He claims Karl is a runaway thief who treated them terribly, and the policeman completely buys the story. Or, at the very least, he simply doesn't care enough to investigate the word of a loud, confident man over a shivering teenager.
Yeah, it's just easier to side with the louder voice.
Exactly. So, Karl realizes he cannot win against the authority of the police or the sheer audacity of the tramps. He is physically corralled, essentially held hostage, and dragged off to the apartment of this massive, domineering singer named Brunelda, whom the tramps are now living with and serving.
So we shift from the vast open terror of the highway and the immense labyrinthine structure of the hotel into this deeply claustrophobic nightmare.
Oh, it's so tight and uncomfortable.
Brunelda's apartment is suffocating. She is a grotesque figure of consumption and inertia, and Karl is essentially enslaved in this domestic prison, trapped with the very men he tried to escape.
And the physical entrapment is incredibly vivid, but Kafka also uses this space to isolate Karl from the broader society. Like to get Karl out of the way, Brunelda forces him out onto her balcony. And from this vantage point, Karl watches a political rally happening in the street below.
Ah, the balcony scene.
It's wild. Kafka describes this scene with a kind of sensory overload that makes you feel dizzy just reading it. There is a political candidate wobbling dangerously on the shoulders of his supporters, looking like he might fall at any second. There is a brass band playing, but the hubbub of the crowd is so intensely loud that the music is completely drowned out.
Total chaos.
Yeah, people are completely ignoring the speech, just casually walking up to a street bar and drinking. And we aren't looking at this through any specific partisan lens. It is simply presented as an incredibly chaotic observation of mass political theater.
Yeah, the rally is a spectacle of meaningless noise. Much like the justice system Karl faced at the hotel, the political system is depicted as a deafening, confusing machine where the actual individual doesn't really matter. The candidate himself is physically unstable, literally tottering and barely supported by the chaotic mob beneath him. Kafka is sort of suggesting that democratic politics, at least from the perspective of the marginalized alien, just looks like an incomprehensible riot.
And while he is trapped on this balcony absorbing all this noise, Karl strikes up a conversation with a student living on the adjacent balcony. This student is working a brutal retail job during the day and studying endlessly at night.
The eternal grind.
The grind, yeah. But he tells Karl something fascinating. He admits he is only studying out of sheer spite. He claims America is, quote, full of quack doctors, and acknowledges he has no real prospects for success, yet he continues the grueling routine anyway.
Well, the student serves as the dark mirror to Karl's initial American dream. He represents the ultimate exhaustion of the immigrant hustle.
Yeah, he's totally burned out.
Exactly. He is doing everything the societal myth tells him to do, working hard, studying late, sacrificing his youth. But he has already realized the myth is hollow. The system is rigged, and his effort brings no satisfaction, only a deep, spiteful bitterness. I mean, he is the ghost of Karl's future if Karl were to somehow successfully integrate into this society.
Wow, yeah. And the claustrophobia of Brunelda's apartment and the bleakness of the student's reality, it finally pushes Karl to his breaking point. He has to escape. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most heavily debated section of the novel. Karl transitions from domestic imprisonment into the vast, bizarre promise of the Nature Theater of Oklahoma.
And the shift in tone here is just monumental.
It's like a different book.
Yeah, Kafka moves from aggressive, suffocating bureaucracy into something entirely different.
So Karl sees a poster for this theater that claims it can, quote, use everyone. It explicitly states that everyone is welcome, regardless of their past or qualifications. Getting to the recruitment center is a grueling ordeal on its own, though.
Oh, the handcart.
The handcart. Karl literally has to push the massive Brunelda in a handcart for hours through the city streets just to get her out of the building and onto a train so he can be free.
It's such a surreal physical struggle.
It is. And when he finally makes it to the theater's recruitment center, which is bizarrely set up at a racetrack, the atmosphere is unlike anything else in the book.
Right, because we encounter a bureaucracy that is no longer overtly hostile. Instead, it is absurdly accommodating, yet still completely nonsensical.
Totally. Karl enters this vast labyrinth of recruitment booths. The categorization is comical. He is passed from an office for people with technical qualifications to an office for former secondary school boys.
Which is so specific.
Right. And finally, because they find out he is from Europe, he is directed to a tiny, remote tent specifically designated for people who had attended secondary school in Europe.
And the hyper-specificity of the filing system there implies a kind of divine omniscience, right? Like, the system has a perfectly tailored microscopic box for every single human variation.
And it gets weirder, because the man running that specific European tent eerily resembles Karl's old teacher from back home in Prague.
It operates entirely on dream logic. The system knows exactly how to manipulate him using the authority figures of his past. And here, Karl makes a really profound choice.
He does. Because he doesn't have his identification papers, when they ask his name to register him for employment, he decides to conceal his real identity entirely. He registers under the bizarre nickname Negro, and the administration just accepts it.
Without a second thought.
The secretary just calmly writes it down, and he is officially hired as a, quote, technical worker.
He voluntarily erases himself.
Yeah. And following his hiring, there's this massive celebratory feast. The text describes endless wine and giant roasted poultry. During the feast, Karl looks at promotional photographs of the theater. One picture shows the president's box. It is this hyper-opulent golden balustrade, beautifully lit and grand, but there are absolutely no people in it. The seat of ultimate power is totally empty.
Which is chilling, honestly. A theater promising salvation for everyone, overseen by a void.
He then has a joyful reunion with his old friend Giacomo from the hotel, who was also hired. The excerpt ends with the two of them on a peaceful 2-day train ride, plunging deep into the vast American interior, looking out the windows at the sprawling landscape. And I have to ask you to decode this for us. Is this theater supposed to be heaven? Or is it just a giant corporate assimilation machine?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because it feels uncannily like getting hired by a modern tech startup that promises, like, unlimited vacation, free organic food in the cafeteria, and total acceptance. But you don't actually know what the product is or what you'll be doing.
Well, the modern tech startup analogy hits the nail on the head because it perfectly captures the insidious nature of utopian promises. The Nature Theater of Oklahoma functions as a strange afterlife-like utopia.
Okay.
Like, notice how the recruitment process mimics a final judgment. You have angels blowing trumpets at the racetrack entrance, the feast of the saved, the train journey into a boundless, infinite interior. But crucially, heaven still relies on paperwork, filing cabinets, and categorization.
Right, it's still bureaucracy.
Exactly. It represents the ultimate immigrant dream of unconditional acceptance. We can use everyone.
But unconditional acceptance is never actually free.
Precisely. The hidden cost is total assimilation. Karl has to literally erase his past, hide his true name, and accept a generic moniker just to fit into this new societal role. The system accepts him and offers him peace, but only after he stops being Karl Rossmann. He gives up his individuality to become a functioning, anonymous component of the great machine.
Wow. Looking at the deep dive as a whole, it's clear that Kafka's America isn't a geographical reality. I mean, Kafka never even visited the United States, right?
Yeah.
He built this world from travelogues, biographies, and his own anxieties. He constructed a psychological landscape.
He built the architecture of alienation. It perfectly captures the struggle of the modern worker trying to maintain their humanity, their dignity, and their identity inside a vast, indifferent apparatus. Whether that apparatus is an uncle's corporate empire, a luxury hotel, or a utopian theater, the individual is constantly being processed, categorized, and diminished.
The next time you find yourself lost in a bureaucratic maze, trying to navigate an endless phone tree just to get a straight answer, or when you feel the crushing imposter syndrome of starting a new job where the rules seem entirely made up, I want you to think of 16-year-old Karl Rossmann. Think of him holding onto his father's old army suitcase, sitting in a strange room, trying desperately to make sense of a world where the map never stops redrawing itself.
Yeah, it really is a survival manual for modernity written over a century ago.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a lingering question to ponder on your own. Consider why Karl actively chooses the specific name Negro at the theater of Oklahoma. In the historical and sociological context of the America Kafka is writing about, Karl willingly adopts a term associated with the most marginalized, historically oppressed group in the country. He actively chooses to erase his specific, privileged European past to become a generic, marginalized worker at the very bottom of this so-called utopia. What does it mean if the only way to finally belong to a system, the only way to find peace, is to completely surrender your own identity and willingly accept a position of absolute subjugation?
That is a haunting thought to carry with us.
Thanks for listening to Book Talks. If you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next conversation.